Strings of Malice, Book 1. Snowflake in an Alley. An Old Mother Nonsense Story. Chapter 12. Locked Docks. Brickdal, 24th Ikrit. Lanrith could tell his sister had something on her mind. She had a pinched, confused expression since she'd returned from her morning errands. She had a far-off look in her eyes and barely touched her food, so he concluded something must be bothering her. He stole a piece of bacon from her plate in a bid to get her attention, and ate it when she didn't notice. Considering their conversation, it could not have been about what she'd discovered about him or his past. Maybe she was curious about Lady Nimue, or who the woman had been with the priestess. It was no matter. She would probably tell him when she'd worked it out. Instead, Lanrith wondered how his sister, who liked the familiarity of the title, might like the sea. With Granny not Crackle Creep refusing his money, he needn't start working again very soon. But if he was going to support them, once the doctor was off back to Congo and no longer insisting everything was on him, he would need to at some point. Lanrith didn't entirely feel comfortable with the flamboyant gentleman's continuous charity, though the doctor was always the one to extend the invitation for them to join him. It was a custom, he claimed, to have picked up during his time in Palwa, but without any way of checking the validity of such a declaration, there really was no telling. Not one to look the proverbial gift horse in the mouth, Lanrith sent up a small word of thanks to the Angel of Luck for the reprieve. However, it was now time to come back to, well, his original plan. To start a life, a real life for himself. And Irinka.
We should say goodbye,
the girl had insisted. She may not have been proper in many ways, but she'd stayed alive long enough to realize that people rarely came into one's life only once. No need to burn a bridge for no reason. What they found, upon inquiring as to their friend's whereabouts, however, was not the suave couple they had come to know. In direct contrast to the bubbly doctor and stern lady, dressed in the finest things money could buy and only ordering the finest food, they rather found an indignantly pissed-off pair, in poor man's travel clothes, day drinking cheap ale, at not the best bar in the city. It was a dingy, warm, cramped hole in the wall that boasted only an unlit fireplace and a grand total of 2 drink options, cold brew or warm brew. All 4 seemed surprised. One pair at the stark contrast of chosen scenery, and the other pair how they'd been found out. The moment did not last long, before the doctor self-consciously smoothed down the front of his jacket, ordered them each a new round, and invited them to stay.
May as well,
Lady Nimue sighed.
May as well have one more before we face reality.
Lanrith cocked his head. Irinka asked what she meant. The doctor answered.
Apparently someone has been playing with the kind of magic they shouldn't.
He started sagely, his hand and mug moving along with his arm as he spoke.
The kind that ruffles the feathers of the crown, and they thought it prudent, without forewarning, that the only practical thing to do was putting magical shields up around the entire country.
His tone dripped with annoyance and sarcasm.
Didn't matter if any of us already booked tickets out. Nope, all travel off the coast is officially impossible. And now you're stuck here in this god's-awful kingdom for who knows how bloody long.
Nimue practically growled as she slammed her cup down. To say the words coming out of her mouth had surprised the siblings would have been the understatement of the century. Made all the more strange when the woman rubbed her hand into her hairline, and she disgustedly wiped her fingers off on the table when they came away red.
We couldn't even convince a sailboat to take us down the coast,
she huffed angrily, before closing one eye and putting on an impression of a roughened sailor.
The current doesn't flow that way, missus.
She plucked up her cup again and grumbled into it.
As though water majors were not a thing. No, it isn't ideal,
the doctor agreed with a dishearteningly heavy sigh.
Can't even write home to Daddy Dearest to tell him that we're stuck. And it will probably take a couple months for the other kingdoms to catch wind of this. If they even care to. What with the state of the world as it is?
You can say that again. Nimue snorted.
Father is going to kill me if I don't show up at that wedding. And then he'll most likely come after you too. Nonsense.
The doctor returned sharply, thrusting his nose into the air.
He is a sensible man, and will easily be persuaded that this was entirely out of our control and—
Not this time! Nimue shouted loud enough to draw the attention of the tables nearest them, but they quickly turned back to their own business. The woman informed her friend that this wasn't one of those situations where he could stick his silver tongue in orifices to make things magically better, and he returned her anger just as passionately, on the premise that they would have already been on their way home if she had not gone to see a friend the whole of the day before. It continued like this for some time, with Lanrith and Irinka confusedly sipping at their ales, but the long and the short of it vaguely seemed to come down to the fact. With the shields up, sea travel more than a few kilometers off the shoreline was impossible. Lanrith drank and listened to the two of them going at it. By the accusations being tossed around, it seemed like there was a lot of stake if this wedding didn't happen. He'd never been particularly fond of novels, but this one was turning out to be interesting. He was so engrossed with the drama, he hadn't realized Irinka trying to interrupt the argument until her command of "Shut it!" rang through the bar. The two nobles stopped instantly, probably because the mouse had looked just about ready to smack the both of them.
I have a solution,
she ordered them, albeit softer now that she had their attention, but it was still an order. Lanrith was impressed.
Thank you.
The mouse mumbled, taking her own seat again.
Now if you'd care to give it a try, the last time the shields went up was because someone cursed the forest, right?
The others looked at her cluelessly.
It was an open secret. Didn't matter who you were. If you went into that place, you'd be lucky to get back out with at least 2 limbs intact.
Very scary, Nimue deadpanned, but it's hardly on topic, mouse.
If you'd let me finish,
Irinka snarked back, curling her hands around her mug.
Well, there was this man. They called him the Body Man. Somehow always had spare arms and legs and things for anyone who ended up missing any. The rumors whispered that he'd found a hole in the shields and would go just out to collect the bodies of the dead floating up from the war going on in the shallows. They said that's how he got the tools of his trade.
Sounds like a bedtime story to scare little ones.
Dr. Grosquares sighed, idly swirling the remaining liquor in the bottom of his cup, but it was clear he was listening.
I think so too.
Irinka nodded.
If the Donrad hadn't paid him off for the location, and they managed to keep a steady supply of Dreamflake and Sundrop coming in for the whole time it was up.
She was too engrossed in her tale to see her brother shift uncomfortably at the mention of the latter. The table was quiet for a long while.
And what are you suggesting?
Nimue huffed.
That we simply walk up to the reception of the most prolific criminal syndicate in the entirety of Cedar and ask them nicely to show us their secret drug trade door?
We don't have to go that far.
Irinka chuckled awkwardly.
No, it's common knowledge that the Bodyman's business pretty much died out after the Majesty Angel sent an army of holy warriors to weed out the evil out of the woods. Story goes he retired to a beach house in Kalaika.
And how would you know this, Miss Reed?
Dr. Grosquares hummed curiously.
Who has been telling such tales?
The girl tucked her head down, and her voice became small at the question.
There was a caravan that would come through the back streets of an area in the winter. People would always go away with them to Kalaika. Said they'd been offered really good money, and as long as they were able-bodied, they didn't need any skills. A few came back, missing parts.
The lady and the doctor looked at each other, and their expressions made it clear they were having some kind of silent conversation. While they were occupied, Lanrith touched his sister's leg under the table and cocked his head at her curiously. She replied by putting her own hand next to his and rubbing her fingers together. Money. He raised an eyebrow skeptically, but was soon given his answer when Nimue asked after the implication that they would be traveling together. Irinka innocently explained that her brother was a sailor and they would need to venture elsewhere to make a living now. If their goal was to get off continent, why not go together? It seemed enough for the small group to leave on the sunset train. That plan had then quickly derailed when, before even 4 o'clock, the Poridae had been stalking the station and detaining foreigners for no reason other than that. A caravan was quickly purchased, and the small party passed at least 2 roadblocks and 1 checkpoint before they even reached the main forest road proper. Lunrith had never been so impressed by a silver tongue before. The doctor had effortlessly spun a tale so convincing, even the sailor had momentarily believed it, and then quite forgotten every particular of it the moment they passed through. No money had exchanged hands, no passports had been demanded, and they had simply been allowed on their way.